Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Probably a good opportunity for me to just give a shout out to our sponsor on the show this evening, that is John Catt Educational. John Catt have teamed up with us again in the coming months, which is really exciting. If you are interested in purchasing a John Catt book, you can do so at the John Catt website, johncattbookshop.com. You can use the code JCTTR2324 and you can grab yourself a book by any John Catt author with a 20% discount, which is pretty cool. So check that out. I'm going to hand over now to Tolu.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Tom. Good evening, everybody. It is so good to be with you this evening. If you are in teaching, I'm going to say most of us, we have reached the end of half term one. Give yourself a huge, huge round of applause because it's been a bit tricky, just with the weather especially. I don't know if any other teachers can relate, but we've had really warm weather this half term, but we've also had really cold weather this half term, and it's just been up and down. Sickness has been everywhere. It's just been a whole thing. So if you have made it to this point, well done you, and just go and get yourself a snack or a beverage and just sit back and enjoy this evening's program. So you've already heard about John Catt, but definitely worth having a look at. I did have a sneaky browse, and they've got some really great stuff on there that I think I might actually purchase myself to do with primary teaching. So definitely worth having a look at their website. So I'm very excited about this evening's show because it was a topic that really it intrigued me from the minute I read about it. And I think it's partly because I am a relatively new parent. So I thought, that's actually a very good point. So today we are talking about parent apathy towards school attendance. And I am very excited for this one because I have a brilliant guest with us today. We have the lovely Toni Mason, who is a head teacher in an inner London school. And she's actually my school head teacher. So I do value her time because I know from experience she is a very busy lady, so I don't take that for granted. But if, Toni, you would like to introduce yourself, that would be fab.
Toni just needs to call in first. Bottom left, I have requested. So there we go.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's worked out. Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
Toni. Good to have you. We can all hear you, which is excellent. How are you today?
I am really good, and yeah, I'm really thrilled that you asked me to join you, Tolu. Just not number one because I'm a bit of a fan of your um telecast. I don't know what we actually say, podcast, really, but attendance is so key, and it's such an issue for so many of us. And there's been such a change, so it's a really good topic to be able to bring and have a chat about.
Definitely. I'm so glad we've got a head teacher as well, because you can really give us that insight into just how important attendance is and, what the reality of it is. I was really hoping to get some parents on to just offer a different view. Because my little one she's just turned a year old, so she's not of school age, unfortunately. So anything I offer is probably going to be hypothetical. But we are basing this on an article actually that was written, and some parents did make some comments. So actually, that's quite a good starting point for us as well. But one of the things that is very central to all of this is the big C. It's COVID, coronavirus. This whole attitude shift towards attendance really started after COVID, or maybe even during it, shall I say. So I guess the first question I have for you, Tony, is what was it like to be a head teacher during that time?
Oh, Tolu. It was so challenging. I'm so thankful for the amazing team that was around me, though. But for having children on school site, we never closed, not one day during anything. And we had children on site, then we had children off site, then we had children, obviously, court places for different reasons. So it was a myriad of just going with the flow, going with whatever we had to deal with at the day. And I think that for all families as well, it became we deal with what's exactly in front of us. We deal with what we have to. And instead of that whole idea of planning for the future and we have to do this because we want to get to the next step, it was pretty much, let's survive today. Let's get through tomorrow. Let's handle this week. And I think that underpins the change in attitude from families for attendance. But during COVID, it was every child being contacted in some way every day. And if they didn't appear online or at school, then it was a phone call chatting to the child to make sure everyone was safe, to make sure that we were in touch and that nobody was in an unsafe situation. And that burden was immense for everybody. And I can only thank the amazing team that was around me for the families that we supported and kept safe, helped to keep safe, because the parents were doing amazing jobs. So it's not just one, but yeah, there's a lot to unpick about being a head teacher in COVID, but it's all about the team. It's about the team who's around you.
Definitely. And those phone calls, oh my goodness, they became I actually really enjoyed them just because, the children make the job, right? So when they're not there, it was very strange. And you started to really build relationships with these families, which is why I think it's quite interesting that in this article, one of the points that they gave, because yes, they said that COVID was a big part of, or rather it was the start of this seismic shift in attitudes towards attendance, they say. Another reason they gave was that there's mistrust between schools and families, which I find quite interesting because, those phone calls that we were making every day, if you didn't build relationships then, you kind of think, what were we doing for all that time? But they were talking about, parents and families not trusting schools, and that's why they feel that attendance isn't such a big thing anymore. There's a variety of reasons, but I did find that one quite interesting. And I don't know what you think about that, Tony.
I think there was a lot of mistrust. You had a system, or you had a culture where everything was happening at such pace and guidance was changing daily, weekly. Messages that we would receive emails from the DFE or from other sources on Friday nights, on Sundays, on at any point at any time, and then those messages had to get out to families. So they were dealing with a system that was just coming and going. But then you've also got an absolute mistrust built in by different people feeding different stories and different stories getting traction of schools aren't doing this or schools are doing this or government's doing this or government's not doing that. But then you've also got that mixed up with the whole issue of the vaccinations and the trust about the speed that worked with. And then you've got a whole system linked to that of sections of our community that very rightly have a history and a mistrust in the medical profession, and we're so linked to all of that, and we became the front because a lot of the services like speech and language support or children and family services, they weren't going out to any families. We were the contact with all our children. We became messengers for all these other agencies. So you've got families who have had very negative experiences with some of those areas, and quite rightly so. I mean, if you just look at the health outcomes for some of the groups within our community, they rightly have a negative experience. And so you have all these stories or people's stories and people's lived experience that were playing into all of it. And then we were changing things from week to week, day to day. And absolutely reasonable for everyone to have a bit of a mistrust, I think, at some point in a real, just a humanistic way. Sorry, that's like, Tolly, that's a big answer to a very simple question. That's just some of my thoughts, I suppose. And they are my thoughts. I don't represent anybody or any one thing. But yeah, just in terms of people's lived experiences really do play into all of these things in what was a very scary time for families. We had lots of bereavements. We had an increase of like nearly 700% on previous years of bereavements. And so you had families all knowing somebody or knowing somebody of somebody that died. And then you've got all that fear building into these lived experiences. And yeah, there was a lot of mistrust.
It's so true, especially what you said about schools being the front of it all, where we were the only people the families could really speak to. We almost became just everything at that point, because they couldn't just go out and see friends and see family and go to the shops. They couldn't do any of that normally, right. But they could drop off their children, especially if they were the what's that term, key worker children. There we go. So we would see them, and I can imagine that it must have just been really difficult. And I'm trying to think with my parent hat on now, thinking, oh my gosh, what would I have actually done and how would I have felt, knowing that some children were able to go to school, but mine couldn't, or I had to take my child to school, thinking about how anxious I would be. I can only imagine and feel for the parents that, had their school-age children at that time. And we're really still seeing the impacts of that now, not only in attendance, but just in a variety of areas. I think it would be really interesting to do like a psychological study.
Yeah.
And one of my friends who is a psychologist is actually listening, so maybe she can help me out with the term. But those long-term studies where you kind of follow people from childhood into adulthood, it would be really interesting to do that with the COVID children, the COVID generation, because they've just been affected in so many ways. But just bringing it back to attendance, I found this comment really interesting, and I wanted to unpick this a bit. So parents have written they've done interviews of parents essentially. And this one mother, I'll just read it, so I'm not paraphrasing, but it says, one mother of children aged 5 and 10 said, pre-COVID, I was very much about getting the kids into school. Attendance was a big thing. Education was a major thing. After COVID, I'm not going to lie to you, my take on attendance and absence now is like, I really don't care anymore. Life's too short. And I just thought, wow, that we do put an emphasis on attendance, and we try and celebrate it wherever we can. Although, there are different schools of thought about celebrating attendance. But I just found that point of view really interesting, that, life's too short. Another parent said that they've been off for months. So taking them out of school for 2 weeks on holiday, what difference is that going to make? And as a teacher, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it makes a huge difference because I know what I'm able to plan for and pack into 2 weeks. But with my parent hat, I'm thinking, well, yeah, you do have to consider children's health, children's well-being, and young people's mental health has been on a decline as well. So there's so many things, but it's that idea of attendance just isn't that important anymore. As a head, Tony, what would you say to those parents?
It's really tough, because you're absolutely right. You've not only got the historical element. I talk about COVID as historic now, but you've got that idea of, actually, let's suck the marrow out of life. Let's actually take the opportunities where we get them. So you've got that now, but also you've got for schools particularly, and a lot of London schools will talk about this, is and a lot of schools in the UK serve and have children and families that are working really hard to make ends meet. So holidays are off the table for a lot of families. So when they're talking about, well, the difference between us going and it not going is taking you out for 2 weeks, it's sort of that very realistic crisis of rising costs and nothing looking like it abating in any time soon. So you've also got that's playing on it. But for a teacher, you've got to sum up with, not only do children who go out of school for 2 weeks lose that pattern and that repetition, and particularly for children who have additional challenges in whether it's SEND or language or another area, for them to lose 2 weeks means that when they come back, they've got to catch up those 2 weeks of learning, because learning is a sequence. Everything keeps building on what you've learned in the session before, in the lesson before. So they've got to catch up those 2 weeks and not lose the 2 weeks that they're currently learning. So the teaching workload is really, really increases. For the child, cognitively, it becomes very hard to not have a cognitive overload of trying to catch up, and therefore losing self-esteem and that feeling like you can do it, because you feel like you've missed out and you're behind. So there's a demotivating factor there. There's definitely an added workload for teachers to be able to catch those children up, and also for parents to try and get them to help us be able to catch up that. So you've got lots of mitigating factors there. So for me, we are only at schools 39 weeks of the year. There has to be something to helping families have these holidays in time so they don't lose out their learning. So rather than all this talk about extended days, let's actually focus on how we can have families and help families be able to achieve it so they don't have to feel the pressure of taking their children out. That's a lot of soapbox moments there, Tolu.
I know it's a very provocative topic, and I think that's why I was so excited to really delve in, because I mean, even as a teacher, there are times where I wish that I could just take annual leave and just book a week off in the middle of October. Or actually, no, we have half term. Never mind. Different month. November, let's say, when it's cold and when it's dark, and that I could just jet off somewhere nice and warm.
Yeah.
But of course, we can't do that. And sometimes when I see the parents doing it and taking their children out, my parent brain, again, I understand it. I absolutely understand it, because the ticket prices are ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Just the difference in price. So I can understand it, financially. But at the same time, it's like, it's everything you said. I'm thinking about what this child has missed and how that's going to impact them in future. And you did touch on, children with additional challenges, additional needs. That routine is really good for them in most cases. Yep. And it's like, sometimes you see these children come out of school and they return after an extended amount of time. And in some cases, it is like going back to square one. You're having to build these routines again. You're having to get them used to everything. And that's before you've even touched the learning. That's just the behavior and the routine. So there's definitely a lot that comes with that. But yeah, it's so tough because, again, children's mental health, children's well-being, even physical health.
I think, but we're not even mentioning actually the parents who actually get time to be with grandparents or extended family that they wouldn't have been able to get to, and them filling up their own cup, their own oxygen mask first, so they're better equipped to be a parent in this very busy, full of pressures world. And yeah, there's so many elements here, Tolu. It's tough.
Yeah, yep, it's so true. And who is it here? So I'm just going back to this article again.
Yeah.
Because they've talked about, just going back to the whole mental health thing, I'll just read a bit of it.
Yeah.
It says that parents also talked in this interview at length about their concerns about their children's mental health and how this impacted upon their attendance. They often blamed schools for not doing enough to support their children. And I read that comment, and that was a bit of a punch in the gut for me personally. Because I just thought, oh my gosh, we are doing everything we can, but the resources that we have are so limited. And it's like, I think that's where that mistrust comes in again. But it's almost like I don't know how we can reassure our parents that we absolutely care for their children and that we're absolutely doing our best, but we can only do so much with what we've got. And it's like, if they don't understand that, that's where that mistrust comes in. And that's when they start feeling comfortable to keep their children away from the one place that actually might be, the best and safest place for them. So I don't know. How do you feel hearing that we're being blamed for not doing enough?
Exactly the gut punch that you're talking about, because you just know how much time and effort that not just me, but the team puts in for every parent, that for every teacher and support staff member that talks to somebody in the playground, to holding parent coffee mornings and just listening. I think for me, it's about, and where I have to go, right, there is a concern being raised. What action do I take on that? And I think that two things, it's consistency of approach and consistency of expectations, to say, absolutely, I'm not going to let my expectations drop in any way for anything. So yeah, I'm going to expect that for children to be here and for them to have a steady routine, knowing their expectations for not only for their learning behaviours, but for their attempting of new learning or recalling their past learning, to be able to build on it and retain it for long-term memory. For their learning behaviours, their presentation, their respect for all those elements, is to absolutely have a consistency of approach in that, and to have that reflecting what the parents are saying at the same time. You've got to go small steps at the same, so to go, right, well, yes, we can constantly be building on our approach and getting that one more parent in and really living and believing in the ethos and the vision of their school and the community element of that. So I keep going, okay, so that's one parent that we haven't quite been able to reach the way we wanted to reach. What's one small step I can make now to help and to change that, and to not believe that it's every parent and it's every family, because there are so many that, like in some of our parent mornings that we had a couple of weeks ago, literally saying to them, what else do you want us to do? What else can we improve? And they've gone, actually, let's keep going because I like the improvements that we've made. And so you're going, okay, great. I've got that parent. We've got that family on board. Let's get another one on board and keep bringing back and changing the tide of trust that we lost during COVID because of just the remoteness and the isolation of the whole experience. So I think that Tolu, I have to keep moving forward. I have to keep going. Let's get one more family back in. Let's get one more child back in and back into the way and our collective way, I think. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think what I'm essentially hearing from what you're saying is that it's all about relationship.
Yeah.
And I mean, so many things in our lives are. It's who you know, and it's how you feel about who you know. And I just think that, again, with cost of living, with COVID, with employment at the moment, our parents are working so hard that sometimes school isn't as much of a priority as, or building relationships with the school that their child is in isn't always at the top of the list, but it just brings such great rewards.
Yeah.
But on the topic of work, actually, something that I did find quite interesting was this whole working from home thing. And they mentioned that parents who, well, since COVID, those that have now moved into working from home, they actually agreed that it wouldn't make them more likely to have their children off school, which I thought was quite interesting. I thought parents that are working from home, they might have different views, thinking, oh, well, if I'm at home, my children should be at home, or that it's okay if they miss a day or two. But actually, it seems that they are more pushing for their children to be in school. And I can understand why. I only work 4 days now, and it is very difficult to get work done with a small person running around. So I did find that quite interesting. But
I think Tolu, that also goes
yeah.
back to what circumstance people have got, right? Because you've got some families who have got enough room to be able to go, right, well, this is my workspace. You guys can be in that space. But a lot of the families in a lot of inner London schools have, and I'm doing a broad sweep here, an absolute broad sweep. They don't have the space to be able to have, because the children will be in the same room as them, and that's almost impossible.
Yes, that's so true. Because I was having this conversation just about, well, in getting ready for this show with another music teacher, actually. And he's got school-age children. And he went down the route of, he was quite interested in whether there would be a class divide, whether there would be a difference in the class of families that are big on attendance and those that aren't. So he mentioned that his more middle class families, because he works in a slightly more affluent area, but they are absolutely fine taking a holiday in the middle of term time. One, because they can afford to take one whenever they like, but also they seem to have it in, well, this is what he's telling me, that they think, oh, because they're more well off, to put it plainly, that they can afford to catch up, they can afford to get the tutors, they can do the extracurricular activities, and they'll be fine. But with our working class families, it's a different kind of attitude. And I thought that was quite interesting. I do think this article mentioned something about class, actually. I'll just have a quick scroll to find it. But I didn't ever really consider that there was a class difference, but perhaps there is.
Yeah, I'm not, without going into too many specifics about our school, the vast majority of families who've got nearly 3 times the national average for children receiving their pupil premium grant. So that sort of gives you an indication for the levels of at our school. So for us, we don't have as big a mix as some other schools. So yeah.
Yeah, I did find that quite interesting, because essentially this article is saying that there's just a fundamental mistrust of schools in general, and that even more affluent parents also expressed a disenchantment with school, although they felt more disengaged than angry, which I found quite interesting. Because I do feel like you're only as engaged, like you get out what you put in. So I don't feel like schools are doing any less than they did before COVID. They're probably doing a lot more.
Yes.
So if as a parent you feel that you're disengaged, I'd be quite interested to know why that is. But I don't know if I have any parents listening, and if I do, please request to speak. This is not we're not talking at you. You are very, very welcome to join in the discussion. So if I've got any parents listening, please do feel free to give your point of view. But yes, parents feeling disengaged, I don't know about that one, because I feel like that's up to you, surely, as a parent, to choose how involved to get. I don't know. What do you think about that, Miss Tony?
I think we talked before about relationships, and I think for us, what we absolutely know from coming out from where we are at this point of the year and the history that we've had over the last 5 years is that it's all about individual people, and everybody has got their own specific reasons for their actions that they're taking. And I think that when we stopped looking at collectives, oh, well, these parents aren't turning up, or those parents aren't doing this, and you actually go, let's chat to those key parents. Who are those children who are persistently absent, who are less than 90%, I should say, those who are severely severely absent, which is what, less than 50%, and then having a look at each one of those cases. And the only way we've been able to change the tide is to treat each family, each case, as a separate family and a separate case. Yes, we've put out the notices about don't take term time holidays. We won't be approving them, etc., etc. And yes, every lesson that you arrive late to, you've lost that learning from that lesson that you need to then catch up in a already congested timetable. Yeah, we've done all of that, but it's not until you go to each family. And one family was unable to have their uniform clean, and they knew that they would we were having a refocus on uniform, so they didn't want to send their child, so their child was vomiting in talking marks, so they couldn't come in that day because they didn't have their clean uniform. So it's absolutely about getting in and talking to those families and unpicking those key reasons, because I don't think unless you have those relationships and you're talking to the families, each separate one, that you're going to make a significant change, I think, at this point.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely a case by case basis, and it isn't right to paint everyone with the same brush. I absolutely agree with that. But again, thinking with my parent hat, I'm thinking, if I could afford a tutor, like weighing up the cost of a tutor in comparison to the cost of going on holiday during school holidays.
Yeah.
Possibly, I can understand parents going for, just taking them out. Again, I'm not actively encouraging this, guys. Please, no one should come for me. Actually, well, my employer's here anyway, so it's fine. But yeah, I mean, it's such a tough one. But this report actually has some recommendations. So I thought let's put on our policymaker hats on and let's dig into this. So recommendation 1, a review of how schools and the wider education system communicate with parents and messaging. So, and the messaging that we're sending out. I mean, speaking for our school, I think we're quite good. We are very, we make sure that we see parents on the gates. We are quick with phone calls and emails and all of those kind of things. But it says a review of how schools are doing it, but I don't see what could change that would encourage that attitude in attendance to change. Because I feel like schools are communicating the way they've always communicated, even before COVID. So I'm not too sure if that would have such a huge impact on how parents feel about attendance and how they view it. So I don't know. Don't know if you've got any thoughts on that one, Tony.
Yes and no. And we've been evaluating who's reaching and how we're reaching it, but also having an eye on our budget at the same time, going, right, well, every time we send a text out to parents, it costs us this much. And actually we can use this free app and that free app, but parents aren't paying as much attention to the messages they get from those apps. And the amount of time that people actually read all of the important information in our newsletter, you absolutely are. And we've changed the way of celebrating some of our learning and, moving into more of the Instagram sort of model and those sort of things. So really moving with the times. I think that I want to almost know, because there's just not the capacity to be able to go into so many schools like we used to because of workload and things like that. So maybe it's about having a look about sharing some best practice of how people are doing that rather than survey. I don't know, because every school is going to be different, right? And there's some schools that are going to be doing it and having more impact than others. Let's share that for different cohorts. Maybe some best case scenario, some best practice sharing. Tolu?
Yeah. I mean, they're recommending a review. I don't know who would be doing that review, but it'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah.
The second recommendation, a review and potential abolition of absence fines, which are deeply unpopular, and that's in quotes. Now, this is not my remit. I have never issued a fine. That is not any of my business, quite frankly. I show up to teach, I do my job, and I go home and continue the work there. But absence fines, Yes, talk to me about those, Tony. Have you had to issue any
We
in your
definitely,
career at
we
all?
yeah, we definitely have. There's such a process though, and people can appeal it and go and then get them thrown out. So, but for different reasons, as long as you follow the process and procedures, they can be employed, and people can pay them. I'm not so sure that the punitive measure, the punitive part of it is going to change families' attitudes to school and learning. And when we're talking about the rest of the things in the article about trust in schools and relationships and people feeling like they're being listened to, and then we're fining them, I doesn't feel like the right direction. And punitive measures never really in my head for that tend to be the case, because people just evaluate and go, well, I've got a grandparent who's really ill and this is my time to be able to go and say goodbye to them, so I'm actually just going to go, right, yep, I'm going to pay the £120 or whatever the fine is, and I'm just going to go, well, this is my grandparent and they were dying. So if you're at the point where you're going to go, doesn't matter, I have to go, what's the use of a fine?
Yeah, because this is what I was thinking. I don't know, like I said, I don't know very much about them, but I do wonder about how effective they are. And I don't know if you can recall any experience ever, but have you ever issued a fine and seen it work? Has that family, made an effort afterwards? Or I'm asking you to think quite far back because you've been doing this a long time. But yeah, any thoughts?
To be fair, it's gone through such phases where it used to be issued by the borough that you were in, and they sort of, the truancy element of it, they took over it and they were the ones dealing with it. So it was out of your hands. I think that the element of being caught before COVID was maybe a little bit more effective than it is now, because for a long time no one was really issuing fines, because we had issued a message of, right, if your child has a cough or a sneeze or a sore throat, stay at home. And then we came back, and now the guidance is obviously, if they've got a sniffly nose or a sore throat, send them to school, we'll send them home if we need to. So the change in messaging has come so quickly, and the fines and the way that fines are dealt with has changed so dramatically. I can't see, and if I'm stating my own opinion, fines I don't think play a huge part in changing the culture.
Yep, I would agree. And I mean, just even in this cost of living crisis, I feel like and again, this is a generalization, but if parents can't afford to bring their children to school for whatever reason, maybe they live far, which I'm finding more, actually, just families being displaced and being put in schools that are so far from home, and they've got such a journey to make. And TfL, I mean, we're in London, can't speak for anyone else, but transport is expensive, whether you're driving or taking public transport. So it doesn't seem like the best idea to then give those families a fine, because if they can't afford to get to school, they're probably not going to be able to afford a fine. So I do think that's quite a good recommendation, actually, to review absence fines and what the sanction is. And I don't even like using that word, really, because
and how effective they are.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fines. Okay, I feel like I know a bit more about those now, so I've learned something today. Other recommendations. So they've also said they've recommended improvements to the accuracy of school level attendance monitoring systems so that information shared with parents is accurate.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online, and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. we're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
I don't know. You'll have to tell me. As a head,
Yeah.
are there often, well, not often, but does it happen that mistakes are made and that has an impact on attendance at all?
No, it's not so much mistakes, but in different ways. I mean, we've had other systems in the past which were harder to engage with and harder to correct and find issues. And then it would only be at census time that you'd go, oh my gosh, we've had this many codes used for this many reasons. And that's not actually, they shouldn't have been used in that way. So it's about being accurate, being quite accurate with what codes and how they're being used. Now, with the system that we've got, where we print out and have an evaluation on a weekly basis. So mistakes are few and far between. And if a parent comes in and says, look, I've got this, this, and this, we've got our notes and our attendance registers to be able to go, actually, this is the conversation we had with you on this day and that day. So it's because we've gone so much more electronic, and that is a legacy from COVID, I think, is that we were able to really have a look at our systems and structures for recording some of these things, because we had to have at hand information for whoever was using it in whatever space they were using it. So we did change and move in a better direction for how we record things. So for us at our school, I think that we're quite accurate with the codes that we're using. And because we're doing a weekly analysis of it, I feel that there's not many mistakes that we make.
Oh, fuck. Go us. But yes, that is another recommendation. So, I mean, if it will make an impact on attendance, then I'm all for it, because I do think that children need to be in school, and not just because of the learning parts of it, but school offers so much more than that. Just the social side is so crucial at that age, primary and secondary. And I'm definitely seeing, as I'm teaching day to day, that the children that didn't have that socialization during COVID definitely act differently to the children that did basically have that socialization. So I think that definitely needs to be part of the conversation, because I'm thinking, as a parent now, I'm hearing attendance. Oh, school's so important, you have to be in every day. If I'm thinking it's just about the learning, well, learning can happen in a variety of ways, especially if you've got a qualified teacher as a parent. Fine. But it's that social aspect of it that I think maybe schools need to do a better job of, I say advertising, just celebrating almost. Because there was something in this article about more parents are choosing to homeschool, which I found really interesting, because I mean, we study to be teachers. We pay to learn how to be teachers. So part of me is thinking, if, someone with a qualification versus someone without a qualification, obviously that is not to say that you cannot be a great teacher of sorts without having QTS. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there is a reason that we train for this profession. So I do find the rise of homeschooling quite interesting. And I don't know if we've seen much of that, or even just throughout your career, families that pull out their children to homeschool. What are your thoughts on homeschooling in general, actually?
It's really tough to say, because I've seen some examples where children have made some really great progress with homeschooling, but at the same time, it's what's around that. For in our world now, we know what's happened with children who didn't have that socialization, didn't have that contact with others, because at those moments of learning how to share, how to get along, how to listen to peer, if children are getting homeschooled alone or in pairs and they're such different ages, they are absolutely losing that ability to be able to negotiate or communicate with others. And I think that that's something that you just can't underestimate. But also, education itself is constantly changing. As teachers, our CPD and what we're exposed to and what we can get a hold of. I mean, whether we're talking about subject competency of, how much we know about a subject that we're teaching, particularly in whether you're talking about primary or secondary, there's a huge element of being an expert in your field, particularly in secondary, and then for primary, having a generalist knowledge of being able to teach what you need to teach and being able to teach in different year groups and in different ways. And I don't see how a family who's homeschooling has the capacity to be able to have that exposure to all of those things for their own CPD, their critical knowledge. And with our changes that we've made with our curriculum and the conscious critical choices that we're making with what we choose to teach and how we're teaching it, be it through the text that we're choosing to teach the skills or whatever it is, that they are not made in a solo environment. They are made as a collective, critical teaching staff, and that is the strength of schools that cannot be reproduced in a homeschool environment.
I'm just going to butt in there because it is a highly fascinating conversation. Just to say that this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. If you're interested in getting a discount from John Catt, you can use the code JCTTR2324. You can get 20% off any book at johncattbookshop.com. So if there's anything in there that tickles your fancy from a professional development standpoint, then you can get 20% off. johncattbookshop.com. JCTTR2324 is the code to use. Cheers.
Oh, you just beat me to it.
That's me.
I'm about to have my influencer moment. You just got there before me. But yes, definitely check out John Catt. They've got some amazing titles on there. Like I said, I probably will end up buying one or two myself because I love to read. Don't have as much time to do it as I would like. But yes, definitely have a look at their website, johncattbookshop.com. Thank you to everyone that is listening and that is joining us. Welcome if you joined us a bit later on. But we are talking about parental apathy towards school attendance and, just how important is 100% attendance. And we've just been talking about homeschooling, actually, because there has been an increase in homeschooling since COVID. And Tony, you've made some absolutely brilliant points that I completely resonate with, because even me, again, putting my parents back on, just constantly switching hats in this conversation. Qualified teacher, I've been teaching for a number of years now. There are a lot of things that I could teach, but that could only go so far because I don't have a Bunsen burner in my house and sodium or whatever chemicals for chemistry lessons. I don't have all this PE equipment. I don't have, a bunch of... Actually, no, I do have a bunch of music.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Instruments. That one I can do. But for other subjects, those resources that you would get in a school, that expertise you would get in a school, that diversity that you would get in a school is very difficult to reproduce. And I absolutely agree with you there. And also just, having an environment to do that well. In inner London, I mean, if you've got the space for it and you've got a gorgeous house with outdoor space, by all means, if you can do it and make it work, fine. But I know that I don't have space for homeschooling, quite frankly. So I will gladly take my child to school and hopefully they will have 100% attendance. But it's interesting. And again, this is where I wish I had a teacher who was a parent. Because I know as a teacher, just me personally, it's hard for me to take a day off because I'm thinking it's more work, and I'm sure all teachers will agree with this, but it is more work to not be in school because of all the things that you have to leave for someone else to do. And it's in those moments that you realize just how much we do as teachers, but two, how much we do it on autopilot. We just have our routines down. We know what to do. But yeah, so it's just really hard to take a day off. But then if you have children now, it's like you as a teacher need to have your attendance to be quite high. But then also if your child is sick, you have to look after your child. So it's such a, there's always something to juggle. It's all one big juggling act, this teaching game. But I do think that, you know, health has something, it's a big part of it. And one of the recommendations is that there should be more of an investment in SEND and CAMS to significantly improve attendance. And I do think that's so key, because I recently spoke to somebody who discovered that their cousin, I think it is, has an additional needs and they want her to get assessed. And the waiting list to be in touch with CAMS or to have an assessment or whatever the process was, they said that the waiting list was about 2 years long. And I just thought that's just so tough, because as a parent, what do you do? Do you keep sending your child for them to be struggling? Do you keep them at home where you can try your best to give them that support and give them that learning? I mean, investment definitely has to go there. And I don't know how much we work with CAMS and what our, I mean, well, I know about our SEND provision, but any thoughts on CAMS and how that can help our attendance, Tony?
Yeah, I think that's really key to bring up children with, particularly with anxiety-based avoidance issues with school. And I think that absolutely lends itself to a conversation about the different programs that are running in the different boroughs, I think. And we have a mental health CAMS assigned person to our school who is now next term running more parent sessions, and I'm really interested to see the take up on that, because it is another way of getting into camps. And I know that in different boroughs have different groups, and one of the groups that we have that support schools for children who are at risk of exclusion or are having significant challenges in school is that they have also got an attached CAMS worker. So there are a couple of, if you're engaging and you've got some options there, it's about knowing how to engage and trying to not beat the system, but to go, okay, so if the general waiting list isn't working, I've got routes B, C, D, and F lined. I've missed a letter there, it doesn't matter. But you've got other routes to try and help those families, because there are so many, but there just needs to be investment and more money going into CAMS because of the impact that they can have in a very short time on helping families support each other and support a key child.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think this is where that trust needs to come back, because if you don't trust your child's school, you will not ask for the help that you need. And a lot of the time there is some form of help available. But if you have this mistrust as a parent, then, you know, you're only doing yourself a disservice. So yeah, again, relationships. So key. Right, the last recommendation, which everyone is going to agree with, I would hope, is that schools should be funded better, because other strains on education systems are manifesting in the attendance crisis. So, money, money, money. I've been listening to a lot of ABBA this week, and I am not ashamed. But yes, funding. In terms of attendance specifically, because I feel like every head teacher probably has like a Christmas list for what they would do if they got more funding. But in terms of attendance, if we were by some miracle to get a large amount in our budget, what do you think you would buy, change, fix, remove to help attendance specifically?
Increase the face-to-face support for key families, and that through our attendance officers or the wellbeing support. Options for walking buses and things like that. So staffing allowances to be able to employ somebody that could, two staff members to be able to pick up some key children whose families, just through a myriad of reasons, find just getting out of the front door a real challenge. But actually, if we could pick up their child, it would help. So that's definitely there. Increase the amount of families that we could help by offering breakfast club and extended services, because we know that actually once they're here, we can also help them with homework and other things in those extended hours. So staffing and capacity to offer more additional places. Oh my gosh. It would be that pastoral manager, like that pastoral support for families. It would absolutely be additional staff members to be that link, so that they can help signpost them and to the different agencies, to the different people, so that school becomes the hub and not the enforcers, I think. And I wish I had the money for the amount of people that I think could do an amazing job with families in that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, it's relationships, because it's people. It's people that bring in those families and those children, and it's that human connectedness, essentially. It's not policy that's going to bring these families back. It's the people. But I do think that would be an interesting question to raise at the next school council meeting. I would love to know what the children would spend money on that would get them to come in every day. I'm sure a swimming pool would be top of the list.
Well,
maybe jelly beans.
We asked this week.
Sweets. I don't know. I think we should ask the children.
we asked the children how they'd improve the school this week, and it was all about the swimming pool. It was about the heated swimming pool, and it was about a multi-level sports pitch.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what they wanted to do to improve our school this week.
Fair. I mean, I'm quite on board with the sports pitch, actually. Anything to keep them active. But yes, it's all funding, and we know that it's a problem everywhere. So that would be nice. We just pray to the powers that be that something changes.
Yeah.
And I was going to go off on a tangent about someone and 25 million days, but I'm not going to do that, because that's not what our show's about
I
today.
know. I've had to hold my tongue a bit, because I've just gone, you want to pontificate a little bit about a few things, but actually you've summed it up there, Tolu. It's all about the relationships that you've got with your families. And when they're saying that they're not trusting you, then let's find out why it is and unpick that and show them what we're doing. And if that's not working, then why isn't it working?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Love that. I am just having a look at some of our tweets, and I can see from, is it Charlie? I'm so sorry if I've mispronounced that. I do apologise. But do feel free to request to speak as well. You are absolutely free to. But she has said that we should equip teachers and staff with tools to respond more effectively to student mental health needs, aimed towards prevention. It helps their overwhelm too, so retention rates improve. And she also mentions that the partnership between parents and staff is essential. And I absolutely agree. Because I do find that there are times where, and this was more when I was in the secondary school space, actually, not so much in primary, but, these children would be going through things. And of course, you follow your safeguarding policy, but beyond that, sometimes I am thinking, right, what is the best thing to do in this scenario? How can I comfort this child? How can I reassure this child? So I do think that, equipping teachers and staff, all staff, is such a great idea. And I don't know if there are any organisations that do that. There probably are, but it might be worth schools looking into that, if that's not something that they do already. Yeah. What do you think, Tony?
Oh, 100% think so. And I think that the more aware we are, enables us. And people go, okay, but then it becomes too much. Oh, well, this child's doing this and that child's doing that because of this, this, and this. And it's not about excusing, but it's definitely the more you understand, the more you can make sure that you're able to, whatever action that you take is going to have an impact. It's going to have an effect on whatever you want to change. So definitely about family. So you're understanding more about the triggers for avoiding school and the anxiety around that. So the more you understand about it, it's going to help you reach and change behaviors and change culture, which is really key. And I think that that tweet is so important because attendance will not change. You will not increase attendance unless everyone feels that they own it, and it's not just down to the person that's having the surgeries. It's not just down to the person picking up the phone and going, "Oh yeah, my child has a sore toe. Bring him in." It's about everyone having that ownership, just like we have with both around mental health as well. But everyone having that ownership of we are all working towards helping our children to attend more, to be present, because we know the impact that them being here has and how effective it is. Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% behind that.
Love that. And I can see that our thriving educator um, is actually a speaker. She is muted. I'm wondering if you are able to speak to us. So we'd
Right.
love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I am here. Are you, I guess I can go now.
Yes,
Hi.
please.
You know, this is such an important conversation that you're having because I've been in education for over 20 years and I taught K through 12, but I ended up teaching 20 years of high school. And I got to teach my students about how their brain worked and what their underlying behavior was all about so that essentially they can understand themselves so they could be a little easier on themselves as they grew up and transitioned into adulthood. And I also spoke with their parents about it and they would go home and speak with their parents. So unfortunately, so many of my students were struggling in mental health way before the pandemic. We all know this. That was a problem
Mm.
well before the pandemic. And so I ended up becoming a licensed clinical therapist because I wanted to understand structurally what was going on, contributing to the personal and family problems we were having, and why they were not only showing up at home, but in our school systems. So I kept asking myself that. And so doing work with families in crisis and adolescents in crisis have helped me understand that it cannot be on one person's shoulders because we lose hope. And that's why parents sink down to this level of frustration, and educators when we get those kids, when we feel like their parents have given up on them and they send them to our schools and their behaviors show up there and we're like, well, why aren't the parents doing anything? And parents are saying, why aren't the teachers doing anything, or why aren't the schools doing anything? We all essentially just have a hard time carrying the burden ourselves because it's tough. It's a tough thing to do. So that's exactly what I do is I work with schools and I developed this program to equip educators, but also parents with 9 essential skills that it all is evidence-based. But we go back to the basics and we essentially need to deal with ourselves. Like, where's our overwhelm coming from? What stories are we telling ourselves that's keeping us from humanizing each other and our children and the parents that we're working with? So that's why I wanted to say something about that, because everything you're talking about is absolutely correct. And the work that you're doing is essential as well. That responsive coaching that you all are doing, I appreciate that resource because we all need it. So there's probably a lot more to say, but that anxiety and avoidance is actually a talk I literally just did 2 nights ago with a parent group. And I will be doing it next Monday in a virtual summit with educators because they are all transferable. And we do need to have that knowledge, just like you were saying. I think, Tony, you were saying that. We have to understand it, not to excuse it, but so that we can problem solve around it and humanize everyone again. So I'll jump off here, but I appreciate the opportunity to give my piece there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That you made some great points, and it's true. There are times where there's almost a bit of a blame game going on. You know, the teachers saying, "Oh, you know, what are the parents doing?" The parents asking, "What are the teachers doing? What's the schools doing? What are the schools doing?" And yeah, I mean, we have to work in partnership at the end of the day. But we do have a really interesting tweet from a very good friend of mine, Kanayo, who says, I agree, but my issue is that teachers are becoming everything to everyone, and that ultimately puts a strain on our core role, which is teaching. If we are busy being social workers, psychologists, attendance officers, being parents to the children, something will have to give. And you know what? That is a very, very good point. There is only so much we can do. Um, it's true, like, we are not just teachers. And I think this is where, for a lot of teachers, this is where we get frustrated with what everyone else thinks about our profession, because they think that we show up, we teach, and we go home, when there is a whole bunch more to it. I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation about, oh, what can we do to bring families in? That just goes to show that we are always thinking about these children. We are always thinking beyond teaching. So that's a very good point there. And I'd love to know, Tony, what you think about that.
Oh, I was hoping you'd ask me to answer that. It's a conundrum, but I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a really good point, because we are constantly trying to look at workload and have that brief of what are we adding, what are we taking away, because we can't keep adding and adding and adding. It just doesn't. Nothing successful is going to really be able to take off in that way. But I say but because it's not almost adding to for us to all have our responsibility for attendance, but it's just to have the conversations that we're having to parents more targeted and more precise in their nature. So actually going, well, they were absent on Monday, so they've missed lessons about this, this, and this. I've prepared some work because they can you do this at home to catch this up, and actually asking parents to come to the table, be going, okay, so you've missed this for whatever reason that it was, because the impact on teachers' workload to have to catch up that child in additional time somewhere in a curriculum is really tough. So I think that you're about saying, let's not add more, but the conversations where they need to be to address those key points. And it's not about saying that we're asking teachers to have extra meetings with key parents, but we're actually going, right, the conversations in the playground or when you're having a chance, because a child, particularly a primary school child, they're not the ones choosing really about not attending half the time. The parents are the ones who have the say. So it's about that, and I'm totally discounting at the moment and not including where we've got avoidance-based anxiety and things like that. But I'm actually talking about the parents are often the ones that have made the choice for that child not to attend, to come on another reason that may have been avoidable. So actually asking the teachers to go, you know what, parents, can, like, this is what they miss, can you see if you can get that done, so that when they're catching up the work this week, they're not falling behind their peers and therefore losing confidence in their learning, etc., etc. And I say etc. because there's all the conversation that we've had so far tonight. So yes, I 100% agree that we can't keep adding roles, but I think being precise in the conversations and knowing that this is actually one of the big things that we need to talk about when we have those conversations in the playground, and at the end of the day is an achievable step.
And I love that you mentioned the point, because I was thinking about this and I forgot to mention it. But very often, the children want to be in school. The children love being in school. Their friends are in school. The songs they like in assembly are in school. The lunch is in school. Most of the time, well, I say most of the time, a lot of the time, and again, depending on where you teach, school is that safe space. It's that place where they enjoy. It's that place that's consistent. They know who they're going to see. They know what they're going to eat. They know who their friends are, what they're going to play, and all of those kind of things. And it's like, it's somewhere that they love to go, but the decision for them to go is ultimately in the hands of their families. And that can be really tricky for our young people if they are in a situation where they've got no say, they've got no voice. They can't say, oh, Dad, I actually feel okay. I feel well enough to go to school. Can I go? And have that, adhered to. And I do think, especially now, I wouldn't say more or less than before, but especially now, I do think that children are very good at voicing their own opinions and their own thoughts. And I do think in some cases, letting them have that agency, they might actually choose school. Um, I don't know about our older ones, but in primary school, I know a lot of them do love being in school. And you see that so clearly when they've got smiles on their little faces and they're saying good morning to you as they walk in. So, yeah, it is important to remember that it is the parents, it is the families. And, even the thing about term time holidays, maybe even just, well, I'd say ask the children, but it's not the children paying for the holiday. So I'll park that comment. But yeah, there's definitely a lot to say about attendance, and that report that came out. It really, I just found it really interesting. And like I said, my daughter's only one, but I'd be very intrigued to see what kind of parent I end up being in 4 or 5 years' time, just because everything is evolving so quickly. And I know Tom, one of our other hosts, has discussed what flexible working could look like in schools, and we just don't know how it's going to go. So we could be having a completely different conversation again in 4 or 5 years. But Tom, would you mind sharing actually your thoughts on flexible working in schools? Because I think that'd be quite interesting to just hear about while we've got a
Sure.
teacher on the line.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much said my thoughts in the show that I did, in the sense that I just think teaching is light years behind, well, probably 78% of the rest of the country when it comes to flexible working. The practices that have been introduced and are being introduced in not just the private sector, but even even areas of the public sector are so remote, so massively different to teaching. It's actually crazy. Like, even just little things. It's not just the working from home. It's there's lots of other elements that are being that have filtered in, and they, some, to be fair, some of them practically cannot be a part of teaching, and they never can be. So therefore, teachers then need to be compensated with salary and other benefits. But some can be. Even as simple as things like, even I tweeted this actually today. Funnily enough, is about sort of teachers having to sort of either pay back if they take an hour off, or pay back if they take a day for CPD, or not get take unpaid leave if they want to go and do XYZ. Whereas in a lot of other places, even in the private sector where it is much more business orientated, they are much more like, what? Yep, we've got flexible working, we've got these provisions. So I just think there's a huge chasm to be made up. I don't know how it's going to be made up, because I still think that in many respects teaching is stuck in the sort of the ice age when it comes to like progressive working practices. You only have to look at like teacher application forms. Like they were made in like Word 1995, and they're still exactly the same as they were in March 1995. Now, if that is then translated into flexible working, you can sort of see, if no one's bothered to change the application form from like Word 1995, or had the time to do it, to be fair, then yeah, it's a massive issue. It's a huge issue, and it's one that isn't going to go away.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I think, again, like just coming back to attendance, where our families of the students that we teach, when they're in industries that have moved forward, that have progressed, I can see why they're thinking, oh, okay, well, school isn't that important. I didn't go to university, or I didn't do this. I wasn't very good at maths. I'm not a great reader. Whatever they've attached to themselves, if they are now doing well in whatever it is they're doing, and they've got the flexible working, and they've got the working from home, and they've got the 4-day week, or whatever it might be, whatever works for them, it's not difficult for them. It's not difficult to see that, they probably apply the same thought to their children. Like, oh, you don't need to be there every day. Like, I'm not at work every day and I still get my work done and I'm fine. But it's all the other things that schools offer. But yeah, flexible working. I mean, like you said, Tom, there are some things that they're just a given because of the nature of schools. But Tony, I'd be really interested to hear what you think about that flexible working, and especially what that might do for attendance, given that our families might be in these industries that are a bit more flexible and actually the school system might not fit into their working world.
No, and to be fair, I laughed out loud just when you said the application forms are in Windows 95 and they still look like they did. It's so true. There's some key things, and it's absolutely you're not reaching the audience that you want to reach because it's not as modern. It's so true. But in terms of flexible working, I was just reflecting on that now. It's in a time of reducing and caving budgets. Number one, CPD is CPD. You get released for that. You don't pay back that time ever. That's definitely not something I think is a model of anybody's effective leadership. But in terms of being able to flexibly work from home and things like that, it's something that you need to be open to. And I think that have that conversation of what could work and how could it work is, rather than saying no, it's not going to work because we need it to be this and this. And I think that it's only when you have that mindset of being able to go, right, okay, so what is it that we're trying to achieve? Right, we're trying to do this to engage with teachers or change the way so that we can have their systems work better. But for families, it's really tough when you've got a class of 30 children to try and fit in with 30 different family situations. So like that's tough. Like, and it would be really interesting to see who's been able to do that effectively, I think. But you have got, I mean, with wraparound and extended hours, you have been able to meet. For instance, we started out maybe 5 years ago before COVID, a breakfast club starting at 8. And then we were noticing some children finding that really tough and getting dropped off at different people at like 9:15, 9:30, and having a chat to some of those families. And they said, well, actually, we have to be at work by 8. So I have to get somebody else to come and drop them off. But they have to do 2 other drop-offs. So we're the third one. So that's why the child is always late. And I think through that, we actually went, we can open up Breakfast Club at 1:45. And then having a chat to those parents, they said, yeah, it's helped. And I said, what would help more? And they said 7:30. And we went, okay, done. And so it's being really strategic because we were able to make that model work without a huge impact on budgets. But it's about having those conversations about how could we be flexible for the families. So it's not about, I think it's about looking at and being really intuitive with your families and those relationships that you have with them. Tolu, I'm really sorry. It feels like the Friday at the end of the term, I've talked that around in absolute circles. I hope that there was some good stuff in that.
No, it was good. It was clear. We understood. And yes, I actually did not know that about Breakfast Club, but that's good to know. And yes, I think even me at the moment doing drop-offs in the morning, like it's insane how early I have to leave my house to make it work. And there were some days where I think it would just be easier to just not go anywhere right now. But yeah, I personally think we need our children in schools more than ever. Not just because of the learning, not just because of the academics, but just, again, those social skills are so important because, again, it's hard to reproduce a lot of what schools offer, personally, I think, anyway, because they are little microcosms of society. And we see all sorts of things in schools. And I just don't think that, I mean, you can take children out. I personally, the odd day, a family wedding, something, usually for me, when it comes to family things, I'm fine with that personally, but I'm not a head teacher, so my opinion doesn't hold any weight right now. But I do think, oh, you know what I mean. Like, if a child takes a day off for a family reason, I don't know what their attendance history is a lot of the time. I just know that they're not there that day. But I do think when it's extended and it's for reasons that are like some of the ones listed in that article, you know, about holidays and what else did they mention? The mistrust and all those things. I do think we have to, yeah, I am for children being in school. And I think that there is, of course, there is benefit. There's learning that can happen outside of schools. We're not saying that school is the only place that learning can happen. But I think the quality of it, the breadth of it, I think those are things that are very difficult to replicate outside of a school environment. So it's a shame that we have this shift in attitude, but I don't know if it's ever going to go back. And I do wonder if part of it actually was that a couple of years ago, we would celebrate attendance. And anytime your child does something well, that's a reflection on you. It's like, oh, my child got 100% attendance. What a great parent I am. But now that we don't do that as much, and I do agree that celebrating attendance is a bit of a sticky one because it's not the child that decides whether they're going in or not, as we mentioned before. But I think it's almost like for parents, maybe they don't feel like there's any immediate reward, so to speak. So it's easier for them to just keep their children at home. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have children of school age at the moment. But yeah, I don't know that attitude is going to change anytime soon. And I think it's going to be very interesting to just see how over time schools will change, how we do education will change, or maybe it won't. Maybe it will be one of those consistent things that just stands the test of time. I have no idea, but it will be interesting to see what education is like in the next 4 or 5 years and how parents' attitudes towards it are in the next 5-10 years as well. And I know you've been teaching for some time now, Tony. In over your career, what major changes would you say you've seen in education so far?
Oh my goodness, that's huge, Tolu. Yes, because I'm not a spring chicken. Although I feel like it sometimes. I think that I've taught across. You can tell from my accent. I've taught across multiple continents, and I think that I come from a country who has long service leave as part of what they offer workers in Australia. So you might be in a job for 10 years and be able to take 8 weeks holiday, and if you're a teacher, you join that to two of their fourth, depends on which state you're in, but they can take like 10 weeks off because they join it to the other holidays, and they'll take themselves and their children out of school and off you go. And the conversations that you had with your teacher was, oh yeah, how about you do a journal, and here's some ways that you can practically apply maths while you're going around, but make sure you take the time to, particularly if you're going around Australia or you're going around to have a look at the country, like absorb as much as you can, listen to the conversations, eat out as much as you can, those sort of things. So to come to this country, which I then found out that we had to find the children who didn't turn up to school, was like, oh, this is a different place, definitely, in terms of culture. So I think for me, my changes that I've seen in education haven't just been over time, but just from changing from different parts of the world at the same time. I think that I love being in the borough that I'm at, have been over, and more so in the last 17 years or 18 years that I've been here, actually 19 in January, being able to just see the change of culture towards education, instead of going, well, this is how we do it, and this is what you do, and this is the accepted way of being a teacher, but actually going, let's understand what we were trying to achieve, and then let's evaluate what could be some good ways of getting there, knowing our context, knowing our situation, and then working that in with the confines of all the parameters that you've got with national curriculum, etc. And then that child-centric approach has been emerging, and now the child-centric research-driven drive has been a real refresh, I think. Just a refresh in terms of being able to say, all right, so why are we doing it? Why have we chosen this? And that critical awareness has increased. And I think that post-COVID, yes, we talk about all the challenges that we had, but what was an absolute joy post-COVID was everything went on the table, because you had almost like a circuit breaker period. Well, you did have a circuit breaker period. You went, right, actually, what was part of our school culture because it was part just because we did it every time and this is the way we did it, and then what was part of our school culture because we wanted it to be part of our school culture and our routines and systems. And there was a absolute refresh about actually what did we want to do and what did we not want to do, and why were we having those opinions and how we wanted to do it. So for me, there have been those significant periods of change in the way I've experienced education and the way that I've seen it experienced by some. And being school-to-school support and helping schools raise the quality and have an impact on the quality of teaching and learning has been such an eye-opener to see all the different heads and all the different influences and just seeing how they put things together. So for me, I think that the changes have been definitely that shift towards a child-centric and that research critical choice driver that you have. And I love it. I'm absolutely here for it every day, going, right, why are we making the choices that we are, and having that reflection on all levels at all points, and not making knee-jerk reactions and not going, oh, this is a trend or that's a trend, but actually being conscious of the choices that we're making and why we're making them, and absolutely having that light in terms of making sure that our curriculum is absolutely appropriate for what the values and systems and that we want our children to be able to be better leaders and better citizens in the future for. And I'm here for that every day.
Love that. Yes, yes, yes. Especially what you said about COVID making us realize that there were some things that we were probably just doing for the sake of doing them and because we've been doing them forever, so why change them? To now when, we think more critically about everything. And it's true, we do sit down and, we have these meetings. Why are we doing what we're doing? And I think the changes have been really good. And I hope that other schools are taking that same approach and really focusing on doing things for the right reasons. Because ultimately it is for the children, and we want them in school. We want them to be happy with us. We want them to be safe with us. So absolutely. I hope I'm in the profession long enough to see what education will be like. And I'll be very, very intrigued to see what kind of parent I will be as a teacher. Because yes, it will be me on the other side of the parents' evening table in a few years. And it's so funny. I always tell my husband, I'm like, oh, am I going to be that extra parent that wants to see everything? Or am I just going to trust the teacher, being like, yeah, you know what you're doing, it's fine. But yes, I will be back with a show about that, no doubt, at some point soon. But to finish off, I would like to know. Oh, I seem to be having some technical issues. Oh, lovely. I think we're back. Can everyone hear me? Is that okay?
Yeah, I can hear you,
Oh,
Tolu.
amazing. Fab. So it said I was connecting, so I got a bit worried then. But just to close, Tony, I would love to know. I used to do this show on a Wednesday, and I had a Wellbeing Wednesday section. It's not Wednesday, but I want to know anyway. As a head teacher, what do you do for your own mental health, for your own mental well-being? How do you detach, wind down? How do you look after yourself mentally?
Oh, it's the biggest question. Number one.
Do you? I hope you do.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. And it's not just retail therapy, because that's not sustainable routine. One of the best things to come out of COVID was for us to get somebody to come into our school and he works with all our staff, and particularly I've made it compulsory for all the DSLs and the deputy designated safeguarding leads and leadership to absolutely make sure that we have a session with him solo or in a group, and obviously for all staff to have the opportunity to meet with him. But one of the best things that came out of COVID was having him with us, because he would sit with me and go, right, okay, so what are your plans for the half-term break? And I go, yeah, no, when I get to the half-term break, then I'll work it out. He goes, no, that's not looking after your own well-being. And it's still a practice that's in me now, 2 years later, to go, okay, so what I want to achieve is I'm going to make this necklace, because I've taken up a little bit of silversmithing because I love it, and had so much fun doing it. I'm not so good at it, but half the things I've made are broken, but it doesn't matter because I'm still getting better. And it was absolutely about making finite plans with people. He said, you need to make sure that you've made that booking with your friend, because if you don't make it, you're going to get to Sunday and go, I'm going to sleep in and I'm going to have this sort of day, or I'm going to have that sort of moment. And it's the best thing, because it means that you don't just hit the ground and just go from, not that it's anything wrong with it to do it for at least a day, I think, to go from pajamas to new pajamas to new pajamas in a day and have that duvet day. That's not my problem. But for me, what really worked, and his advice for me that worked really well, is to make those definite plans. So I've got 2 sessions planned with 2 friends. I'm going for a drive to see the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which I love. So if you're going there in the half term and you see me, just please wave. So I've got those plans to go and see these places. So for me and my well-being, that's absolutely here. And the conversations with him also allow me to leave work at work. So that all the stresses and worries I've got with it, whether it being parents or families, because I can talk about them and explore them, I'm able to leave more of it at work. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying I do it all the time, because I still wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, what about this family, or what about those children? And we've had some real tragedies this half term that have taken up quite a lot of my heart space and my mind space outside hours. But because you get to chat to somebody, there is an absolute element of being able to budget and be able to be healthier. So that's a small but a shift for me. So I'm absolutely able to have a great break.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I think that the position that you are in, you definitely have to look after yourself. And I would encourage all members of senior leadership teams and teachers and anyone that works in education, just anybody. It's so crucial to look after your mental health. So please, please, please do not neglect it. But yes, we have talked about attendance and parental apathy and SEND and CAMS and swimming pools and a whole bunch of things. But it's just been a really great conversation, and I'm so grateful for everybody's contributions. I will just finish by saying that our amazing show, has been brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools and around the world. I mean, who doesn't want that? Have you checked out their latest releases? I have, and they are great. This is my influencer moment, guys. There's a discount code. Right, wait for it. Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. So please don't feel like you have to wait for your head teacher to announce what the next inset topic is. You can absolutely do your own CPD by heading to John Catt and having a look at some of their materials there. They've got some really good stuff there. And Tony, I know you're quite an avid reader, so definitely recommend you having a browse there. But I feel like I shouldn't be encouraging you to spend money. Like, I've been doing that a lot with my friends recently. Like, I'm like, oh, you should totally get this. And it's useful stuff, but yeah, cost of living, cosy lives, as they've been saying. So I need to not influence my friends that way. But on that note, thank you so much to all our listeners. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And if you are in a school and you are teaching staff, have a wonderful half term. Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time. on Teachers Talk Radio.